We know that an empty attraction costs you money. However, underpriced weekends, when we know that everyone wants to join your attraction, costs you even more. So that's why we created a dynamic pricing system that allows you to switch pricing according to the demand. All right, so right here we have our ticket, the daily pass and the weekend gold pass. We can also set season passes and bundles, but right now we're just going to focus on the actual dynamic pricing for passes, both during the weekdays as well as the weekend gold pass. All right, so let's jump into the daily pass. Let's see what we have in terms of pricing and availability. So right off the bat, we can see that there's two options. There's a calendar-based system where we want to focus on attendance, and one that is just providing some flat fees. Right now, we're going to focus on the pricing and availability rules for calendar or timeline-based options. So as you see here, I've actually already set up two pricing modes, one for the weekdays and one for the weekends. If we dive into the weekday options, we can have a look and see that we've set up the pricing to be available for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. We can also set a capacity per day. So let's say 1,200 visitors per day. We can set a start and end date for our pricing rules. But this is where things can get really interesting. So for example, let's say we know that our Tuesday is not our most popular day. So let's set our pricing a little bit different from the standard $41. So if our capacity is under, let's say, 200 guests per day, we're gonna have a special amazing price of $25, just so we can encourage our guests to come on those empty days where we do have fixed costs, but revenue is not moving too fast. Right, so we have our first 200 guests inside, and they purchased an amazing package of $25. Now that we have started setting up our sales, let's go for the next tier. So if our capacity crosses 200 guests per day and moves into 700, we're gonna raise our prices a little bit more. And this is one rule that we can only set once. We only have to set once. You can change it as many times as you want, but there's nothing you need to do while things are operating. All right, so the prices now increases to $35, and everything above that during the weekdays, because we only selected Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, is gonna be the standard $41. However, we have a capacity of $1,200 guests. However, we know that at about 1,000 guests, our park or attraction starts to become functionally full. So we're gonna set a rule that allows us to have the $41 price up to 1,000 guests. But between 1,001 guests and 1,200 guests, we're going to increase our pricing because we want to slow down demand. We never want a too crowded water park or theme park. So this is where we're going to increase our price to $60. So the last tier, once we crossed the first 1,000 guests, is going to be a bit more expensive. So we can increase the revenue, but also decrease the demand so we can have as much guests as possible without having too much of a crowded attraction. All right, once we do that, we just press the save button and we move on to the next option in Oveit. All right, so our dynamic pricing has been changed. Right now we have a base configuration of $41, and you can just leave it at that. Sometimes everything it takes is just have different kind of pricing between weekend and weekdays. However, if we want to play around with the dynamic pricing, we can also set this amazing tiers. And here come the group deals. We know that some pricing is better when our friends join us, And as attraction managers, we know that we want to incentivize groups, couples, families to join because the more the merrier, both from an experience perspective as well as from a revenue perspective. So you can set group deals. So for example, even though 4 tickets would cost usually $41 times 4, so that would be $164. We're going to decrease it to $140. And when we have 10 guests, we're going to decrease our price from $410. All right, let's just set this to 10, and we're going to decrease this even further to $300. You're asking, all right, so we have the group deals. What about the dynamic pricing? What is the primary rule? Well, it's the dynamic pricing. If the dynamic pricing is the better option, that's going to take over. All right, so we're going to save this. We have group deals, we have dynamic pricing, we have special days, and we are now going to have a look at other options. All right, let's go back to our daily pass setup and see what other options we have here. Right, let's say we have set up the pricing and availability rules for weekdays, but what's happening to the weekends? Because that's where we know most of the revenue and most of the fun is coming from. Well, let's have a look at it. This is where I've set up another pricing option, and this time our pricing goes up. It starts at a higher price. It's $55 instead of $41. And then we have an increase in the pricing starting at 800 guests. So once 800 bookings have been confirmed, our price is increasing to $65, so we can maximize the revenue for that specific day in a very transparent rule for our guests. However, during the weekdays, that's where the crowds are coming in, right? So we know that the first 1,000, once we cross 1,000 guests, well, around 85% capacity, that's when things are getting crowded. So this is where we actually want to de-incentivize purchases, right? So we're actually increasing our pricing by about 60% to $85. So on one hand, we're decreasing demand because price is higher, but if someone actually wants to go in, they're going to pay a bit more, so our revenue can help us manage the fluctuations in access control and demand on our staff. So once we save it, we're ready to go. We have the weekdays and we have the weekends. What else can we do? All right, let's have a look at the override rules. What's happening on the 4th of July? Because that's where we want to change things a little bit. All right, so in that case, we will have a special date. So let's say we have the 4th of July. We know that that's going to be a packed weekend, so we're going to increase our pricing to, let's say, the maximum we can provide for all guests. That's when everything is going to be packed, so we're going to move it to $85, and we're going to decrease the capacity to, well, we're actually going to increase it because we know a lot of guests are coming. We can hire extra staff, so let's just move it to 1,400 capacity per day. So once we set this up, we're going to press save, and we're ready to roll for the 4th of July. All right. Once we set this basic options on, we can start setting up dynamic pricing here as well in the custom rules and the additional options. We can set higher or lower pricing depending on capacity, but we already set up our base configuration. All right, so what's happening when, let's say, we want to have some blackout dates? Well, we do have blackout dates. So on, let's say, the 5th of July or 6th, maybe we're going to have our park closed. So we're going to press save, and we know that there's not going to be any sale on the 6th of July, so we can clean up and operate new changes for the upcoming weeks. All right, so we can have some additional extra settings like the maximum number of tickets per order, but you also have some extra incentives, which are the add-ons. So let's have a look at how we can improve our revenue and sales and incentives even further with add-ons. Add-ons are options that we can pack inside our passes. So for example, in this case, we can allow our guests to buy an extra item. In this case, it's a floaty with $70 extra at purchase. However, we can also include some specific add-ons with our purchases. So in this case, we're going to add a locker. All right, so we're going to add the locker, which in the backend is going to communicate with our locker system. And this locker is actually included in the ticket price. We're going to press save. And now our guest can purchase an extra floaty or other products and services you might want to upsell them on. And they also have a locker included in their daily passes. All right, so now we've set up a pretty complicated system for our pricing, but this is just one of the tickets. So what if we want to do like a VIP or a gold pass? Well, in the backend, I've actually set up a weekend gold pass. This can operate as an independent option as apart from our existing pricing. It's only sold during the weekend. It's the weekend gold pass. It's a bit more expensive, right? And it also has some add-ons included. Well, in this case, they're not included, but let's just press the included in ticket price, and our customers will get a t-shirt and they will get a cabana, which is pretty cool. So in the purchase option, they will pay a little bit extra, but they will have a private cabana for them and their families, and also a cool t-shirt that they can claim in the gift shop. Right, so I hope you enjoyed this video and it helps you set up some better pricing to improve capacity management as well as revenue in your attraction. Thank you so much.